to think about the world impact that technology can have. There are a number of megatrends that are occurring in technology as we race to discovering new things. So there's demographic shifts, there's urbanization, there's a pressing effort to digitize many industries, and companies are working very hard to move to the cloud and to port what was previously manual or paper processes into digital capabilities. There's also diminishing trust with some of the political climate and changes that have happened. Many countries have instituted policies and governmental regulations around the movement of data and the types of applications that can be run within their country boundaries, et cetera. And of course, we're all very familiar with our 106-degree day yesterday of the impacts of climate change and the effects that that also has on food security. So the other thing that's happening is that many of these changes in digitization and applications is really kind of creating what we're calling an insatiable appetite for resources. So I don't know if any of you, working in the cloud today, just start with the cloud and then you find out, months later that, your bill is really high because you keep using more and more and more, and you're creating more and more data that you're saving, for example. But it's, more and more of our applications are data intensive. There's data everywhere, both, at the edge where it's produced, but also, in central data centers and then up in the cloud and being shared and moved and analyzed with AI and oftentimes API driven. So that has resulted in a greater than 100% growth of data being generated. And you can see the quote here from IDC is that the amount of global data is expected to more than double in size between now and 2026. That doesn't come at a cost. Or it doesn't come, it comes at a cost. Too many negatives here. All right, I want to share with you just a quick inspirational video about the power of being able to address some of these complex issues around sharing data across distributed and diverse sources of where data is created. I'm going to use an agriculture food systems example here. And the example will show you how the sharing of data can actually help farmers, and in this case, an example, small shareholder farmers, of which 70% of the world's food is produced by, and how helping those farmers learn how to access technology to improve their yields, to improve their knowledge about when to harvest and when and which markets to take product to. So I'm going to pop out of this app and share another one with you in a second here. All right, let me go on. I have to go out of here. Okay. Don't know about that. Don't save. And get out of this. Coming back to sharing here. That's me. I'm going to come back to. Are you now? You're not going to hear unless I unmute here. Sorry. Are you able to hear? I'm not muted. I'm going to start that over. It's all right. Sorry, I got to start it over.
Share the video that the shares. Sharing option. You share video. The share. Share. And it says about the share sound in the lower left. Way down the bottom.
All right. I lost my window, I think. Here we go. Now I want to restart it, actually.
Monitor and predict what kinds of shocks will be coming.
All right, guys. Start over. I'm not sharing. Okay, too many options here. Okay. Let me go back to my Zoom.
They probably didn't ship the share button.
Yeah, but I have to find the right window. That was this one. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we're good.
start over again. Okay, I come back to here.
Ending hunger is a systemic issue linked to poverty, health, and climate. It's an issue we see most acutely in Africa. To solve it, we'll need complex data analytics, systems thinking, and global partnerships. And we need to act now.
We need to be able to monitor and predict what kinds of shocks will be coming, where crops will be suitable to grow, what kinds of varieties of crops we need, or people's livelihoods will be sort of pulled outright from under them.
Because these problems are so complex, it's going to take a coalition of people and technology to make an impact. Organizations like NGOs, the Consortium for Global International Agriculture Research, CGIAR, private industry, governments, policymakers, and of course, farmers that are actually producing the food.
At Digital Green, our work really starts with small-scale farming communities themselves because they are the majority of our source of food. 80% of farming is done by these farmers that have less than 2 acres worth of land.
Digital technology enables us to measure and to interact with people with very specific information that they might need.
Various types of artificial intelligence and big data analytics, when paired with these human relationships, can be hugely powerful.
The ability to measure things on the ground and the ability to look at things from space and start to put those measurements together that give us the real richness of analysis and prediction that we need to move food systems towards greater sustainable, better livelihoods, better sustainable outcomes, and so forth.
Collecting this data and sharing it with organizations like CGIAR and Digital Green allows them to share data with their communities all over the world. These farmers can use the information derived from the data to help them in growing the right crops at the right time, at the right place, with the right amount of water and fertilizer, and all of that will result in greater production of food.
Without scale, we're not going to be able to solve these huge problems of agriculture and global development. If we can connect the dots with data and information, starting from the farmer, linking it across the value chain to consumers, there's a real opportunity to close these gaps.
It's possible to bring multiple communities, public, private, nonprofit, smallholders, industrial. It's possible to come around, to form communities around solving global challenges.
And if we want to have a hope in feeding the 9 billion people expected in the world, we have to make a change. I absolutely believe that technology and gaining information and data in a transparent fashion can be shared with those who can benefit from it and combat world hunger.
Right, so now we got to flip back. I have 2 of these open. Okay, so and actually, let's see, I got to go back to. Are you seeing full screen?
We're missing.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
there.
Alright. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'll have to embed this next time. Okay, so going from discussion here around the possible impacts, it's not a new concept. I mean, coming from kind of one of the original Silicon Valley pioneers and kind of DNA to most of the companies, tech companies, certainly in the Valley, Hewlett and Packard, they always had a vision around applying technology to the betterment of society. And here's a quote from Dave Packard that really said, "It's not for a job to be left to a few, but it's a responsibility that we all share." So with that in mind, there are challenges in doing projects and technology impact projects on this kind of a scale. When you look at the United Nations SDG goals, those are huge problems. They're not trivial to solve, and they're very overwhelming. And if you expect a company to participate in solving them, you inevitably reach the question of, at what level of investment? And do I have, and which problems should I participate in? And the problems too is that they're very interconnected, complex problems that I have learned really require systems thinking. But it also pauses me to remember, what are engineers best known for? Systems thinking. What are companies quite good at? Systems thinking, and applying our, understanding of how to bring a system to play at solving difficult problems is something we are very well skilled at doing as engineers. But some of the challenges that we will face in tackling these problems is that you'll be asked, what is the true value? How these problems are so large, can you even scratch the surface? Can you have any kind of impact? And part of that comes to, what are your metrics and how do you define metrics, and what is your goal of even being able to acquire the data to measure your impact? The other thing is, do you have the subject matter expertise in your team, in your company that can actually tackle this? In the case of agriculture and food systems, which was one of the first areas I tackled, and not in my current role, but as a graduate of Purdue University and someone working, to represent our company to Purdue, they had some opportunities around agriculture. And so we started to pull in subject matter experts from outside of our company to assist us as under a pro bono, for free project. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. The other thing that's going on is, your ability to impact these issues are really also going to be regulated. There will be restrictions over who has access to data, who has access to policies, who you have access to in the governments of the countries that you're actually trying to work within. So let me go to tell you a little bit more about that. Oh, and I should also say, for those of you in companies that are kind of skeptical, saying, this is too large of an investment, I'll never get my company to participate. Let me just share that, being a force for good is now also a source of business advantage. You will see more and more ESG requirements coming from your financial and shareholders, and they're basically showing that businesses that can link digital and sustainable transformations are 2.5 times more likely to be among tomorrow's strongest performing businesses. The time is now for really looking at ESG opportunities. So I'll share with you a little bit of kind of the way I've approached the programs at HPE and have shared this with other groups as well. From a measuring success, which was one of the big challenges I mentioned on my last slide there, I believe you have to measure impact, and you have to find to track how you're accelerating against the key SDGs. I also believe that to companies and maybe even to schools, having an ability to measure the culture changes that working on these projects actually provides to your partners, your team members, your employees is really significant. And you can really inspire and drive more employee engagement and retention through, an opportunity for employees and partners and students to participate in these projects and then communicate about them and be recognized for participating in that. And we have real life experience at HPE showing growth in our Voice of the Workforce studies, surveys, and also employee retention around desire to work on these kinds of projects. And then finally, that affects your brand. as a company, or maybe even as a university or a school or a team, being able to talk about what you've done with external stakeholders has a positive effect on people wanting to work with you. So partnering in ecosystems, that's one of the first things that we learned in one of our first projects around agriculture, was that it does take a village. It takes an ability to work with people who have been studying these areas, policymakers, government officials, NGOs. And that requires the ability to convene those stakeholders together, bring them together, and talk about what perspectives or skills that they can bring to the table to help tackle a problem. And I also believe you need to tackle these projects through a lens of both technical, but also cultural challenges. And oftentimes we have technical solutions that seem quite obvious to us as engineers. However, they're not practical to be implemented actually on the ground and in the field. So having, I think, what I'll call a last mile partner, somebody who, like in the video I showed you, Digital Green is a last mile partner who's hands-on working with those small shareholder farmers, is essential, because they can tell you right off the bat how difficult it is to scale something, or what's feasible and what would be accepted by the villages. One example of that is many of the small shareholder farmers that we were targeting in India actually go through a co-op, and the co-op calls the shots. The co-op makes the decisions over which markets they'll be selling, the farmers that they represent will be selling into. And so we learned you have to engage and provide the technology to the co-ops, not just the small shareholder farmers. The other thing is you need to tap your employee expertise. So I found when people started to learn about the opportunity to work on these projects is that we had a lot of employees raise their hand and say, this is so cool, how can I get involved, what can I do? The problem is not everybody had the same expertise. Some people were terrific project managers, but didn't have technology expertise. Others were great networking engineers who could go out and install a Wi-Fi on an agriculture field, but maybe weren't the best in explaining how the data traveled into the data center, for example. So it's important to understand what technical capabilities you need. And then you have to track and measure and report the heck out of it. And then you have to share that knowledge. So I'm sharing it here with all of you, and sharing it through communities of practice as well. But it's important to have a transparent and a full knowledge base to be able to grow and scale. I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'll share a couple of examples, and I'll say two things. One, I'll call out the Oak Ridge National Lab. So we recently helped the Oak Ridge National Laboratories install the Frontier supercomputer. It's #1 on the top 500 list right now. But they're doing very, very crucial AI and climate science research that requires that kind of power. And some of those projects, really do require significant compute power. That's an example of technology for global good and impacting change there. The other one I will share is Carnegie Clean Energy, and you'll hear more about that in Puneet's sustainability talk tomorrow. Carnegie Clean Energy, this is a pro bono project where they're studying how to gather energy off of waves off of the Indian Ocean. And they're using a special technology of a buoy that sits in the water and predicts when a wave is coming to capture that energy and then supply it to the grid, enough energy to power an island. And so they had challenges. They're a small startup. They knew what they wanted to do, but they didn't have enough AI and reinforcement RL knowledge. And so we paired a researcher in our labs who was an expert in RL with their project. And it was a win-win because our RL expert got real life data, real life exposure and experiences to build their knowledge set and innovations around RL, while Carnegie Energy benefited from being able to incorporate that into their product. That's a pro bono project. I wanted to share another example around how you go about looking at projects and deciding what to tackle or what you could pick. This is a chart out of the World Economic Forum, who was a partner along with a few other nonprofits in agriculture and food systems. This is from the New Vision for Agriculture, where they took a look about, where are technology advances coming from, and what are these digital building blocks or these advances, and how could they contribute to the overall world of agriculture and food systems. And so when we looked at this chart, And I was a part of the team along with, the United Nations World Food Program, FAO, that helped to build this. We looked at it and said, how do we select which one of these we want to work on? Where do we have particular expertise? Where do we have particular interest? How does it align with the strategy we want to build knowledge around? And where is there employee excitement? Right. And also, since impact is our #1 measure, which of these technologies do we think could have the greatest amount of impact? So I put some examples of areas that we found interest on, and that we started to kind of pick projects that allowed us to illustrate innovations and build experiences in those areas. So you could build a map like this for any of the projects that you're exploring in order to kind of narrow some of these large issues down to something that could be tackled. I would say the other thing I would recommend is to start with a beachhead. So start with a project. And in the case of agriculture and food systems, about, 7 years ago, I mentioned that we were working with Purdue University, and they have a 1,400-acre student farm where students in agriculture learn about agriculture and farming. And they did not have any kind of IoT or Wi-Fi enablement. They had, rats eating the mice, vermin eating the wiring that they had laid. And they would send a graduate student out every Monday with a thumb drive, called SneakerNet, to run out and gather data. And you would not expect that from a university that's well known for engineering at Purdue. We came back and we explained and showed how data could be easily sensed and gathered off of those fields. And then eventually in phase 2, moved that data into a private cloud that they had on campus. Phase 3 now is to share the data in that private cloud to their community and their extension services beyond, around local dairy farms and other startups that they're encouraging the growth of in the agriculture and food systems world. So it's an example of start small, learn as you go, include your partners, and then build it out. There's a couple of other examples I'll share here, and one is around geospatial data analytics. This has a tremendous amount of promise. There's a lot of data as the world changes around science and health policies and economics, and of course for COVID-19. And in the case of COVID-19, we actually saw that there was modeling that was very possible. We had our AI team in Europe start to help at the beginning of COVID-19 in 2020 to try to predict the spread of the disease. And one of the things through the AI modeling that they did and found very quickly was that there was a particular vulnerability for older demographics, older communities. And so being able to predict, what the vulnerability of the older demographic groups were to particular health threats and to plan for it allowed countries to be able to predict their need for ICUs, ICU beds, and what to do when you had an under-resourced community and how to support them. The other example I'd like to share here is with Novartis Global Health. So in this case, this is a project underway where we're working to model the spread of dengue fever. So dengue fever is in the top 10 World Health Organization emerging tropical diseases. It's a major threat, and there is no cure. There are no therapeutics for it. And many people die from dengue fever. You don't hear a lot about it. And so as an example, we started to work with them to try to understand the effect of climate and demographics and urbanization and other things like sanitation. And what we found was some interesting data, which was wind speed has a major role in the kind of movement of mosquitoes, which carry the disease. And there are a few other things that came out of the AI work. We're now taking that AI work into India in the next stage of the pilot and connecting it to village health centers to be able to predict which villages are going to be susceptible with like 6 to 8 weeks notice, so that public health officials can respond and maybe deliver tents or mosquito netting or clean standing water, other kind of contributing variables. So, however, that takes a lot of teams, a technology partner, a health and life sciences company like Novartis, a public data goods organization, engagement with the governments of India and ministers of health to actually kind of bring this together to have an effect. This is another pro bono project. So I shared about Carnegie. You'll hear more about that tomorrow from my colleague. I just want to share as I wrap up here that there was a significant benefit from engaging employees and students and others in these Tech for Good projects. And we know already, and I know this from my work around education and retention of underrepresented minorities and women in STEM, that oftentimes people leave or don't pursue the field of engineering because they pursue it, they perceive it as boring. They think they won't have impact. They don't see the connection to people. They don't necessarily see the connection to anything other than helping a company make more money. That's an old mindset. And there aren't a lot of good stories told about how technology is making the world a better place. And, you know, some of that comes from kind of departmental thinking, one and done projects, go on to the next one, lack of exposure and involvement with customers. When you're on the engineering side, usually it's your customer facing sales teams that are out working on the front lines. And sometimes people get apathetic. And there's been a lot of, you know, dropout from the engineering and STEM fields. I think the new mindset, and it can be enabled you know, by Tech for Good projects, is that technology careers can and do impact the world. And it creates, you know, a sense of teamwork by having shared responsibility, development in individual employees' skill sets, retention, and allowing for a source of innovation. I know personally, we have seen new ideas and breakthrough concepts come from some of these projects. It creates energy. I literally get multiple employees a week call me to say, hey, do you have a project I could get involved in, something I could do on top of my job, because I just am interested in this. This is where my passion lies. And that actually creates great business value in the end. So the, you know, technology's true promise really is around the ability to have an impact, to have social impact. You can create game-changing innovation from technology and social impact work and really engage your employees. And I would say, you know, you differentiate your brand along the way. You can meet new business requirements for sustainability that are rapidly emerging, and you can improve your culture and your organization as well. So I know I kind of tried to make up a little time here, so I'll stop and ask any questions.
Well, we have time for a couple of questions.
The nuts and bolts talk about the value of engaging employees on different give some nuts and bolts what work. Like you say, one employee, this is your whole job for the next year. You say 10 hours a week working on this project, and you try to spread out the work, get the project from multiple people. How do you handle that at kind of the maximum well benefit the project but morale return to employees?
So I'm going to repeat the question for the Zoom audience, which was essentially, what are the nuts and bolts for allowing for employee volunteerism, and how do you structure that in a way that meets the business requirements as well? So what we have done, we actually have at our company a ability for every employee to volunteer. I think it's 5 or 6 hours a month on whatever they want, and they can use time away from work to do that. So our first approach is, hey, you know, if you want to spend your 5 or 6 hours a month on this project, let's sign you up. The other thing we've done is we have kind of a new program called kind of a gig program, where an employee can come on loan to a project and actually work on it for a kind of a negotiated period of time with the employee's manager. So I have a data-oriented project right now related to the Novartis work. And I have multiple employees that are working for me full-time, but not like for me, like they're still paid their salary and they work for their managers, but they are on loan to me with their areas of expertise because they love the concept and the ability to interact. And they're negotiated through this gig program, which, you know, I publicize, here's what I need, and people respond, and their managers say, hey, that works, you know, for me, because they're going to come back with real life exposure, experience around how to implement a project. They're going to come back with knowledge there. So that has worked so far for me. Now, I have also saying that we've had a boatload of new projects come our way, maybe as we talk about them more and more. And so I'm going to have to do some thinking about, you know, how do I scale this even further amongst, you know, dozens of projects to maybe 100 projects, and how many is too many, and how and when do we start to work with meetups or other outside groups to actually partner on some of these projects in order to get the scale that we need.
One more quick question.
It's on.
You showed a picture of using mapping technology for helping with disease spread and other kinds of negative effects. Are you using mapping technology also for positive effects, like the spread of leadership? One of the conditions that we see happen in one direction for agricultural know-how, any other kind of positive effects?
Yes, absolutely. So agricultural know-how is definitely one. Another I'll say, which I didn't talk about today, is around education of STEM for underrepresented minorities and women. We are using AI to actually understand, depending on where students live and work and play, to understand what content, STEM content, actually causes them to be interested, improve their attitudes about STEM, improve their self-efficacy, and encourage them to devote more persistence to getting ready to take a career choice in STEM. And we have found with AI that there's a very real, we've been published in a number of academic resources now, have found significant information around how our STEM education content can better attract and appeal to women and underrepresented minorities, that the way we structured our content and the way we teach many STEM disciplines is geared towards one demographic, and there are modifications that could be made to actually attract and appeal to the others as well.
Thank you so
Out of
much,
time?
Janice.
All right, thank you.